Alright guys, Scrappy here, and I hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far with Scrap and Liam getting their first time together in Ranked last night. Scrap gives his thoughts on why Kenny was eventually removed from Thieves, why it wasn't the players on the team's decision, and also where this all came from over the last couple of years. Scrap says it all dates back to the OpTic days, and that OpTic team not being especially helpful to Kenny when he was going through a difficult time. An interesting explanation for sure. Very well to join to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. Lots to get into. Simp turns 25 yesterday. Happy birthday to the franchise. Say FaZe Vegas, of course, he is the key man of that team and has been for some time, and that was the case yet again on the Championship Sunday where they pulled out the Championship Reds, having made it to Sunday. Of course, they made a pretty fantastic losers run until finding themselves up against Neptune on that Colossus Search and Destroy. The game has changed. Ranked players officially here. Dan Ghosty, champion of the previous major, says, in agreement with what Hixie says, these overload spawns have to be different to what the pros play, spawning mid-map constantly, but Ghosty says no, they definitely did some sort of a spawn change. So yeah, for those of you playing Ranked so far, overload, often it is the case with the third game mode. When you're solo queue, it's not ideal, and they've also made some interesting tweaks to the spawns. Of course, this has been a talking point, hasn't it, when it comes to what they might want to do with Park the Bus, whether that strategy could potentially be removed. In fact, Shotzzy talked about it and said, maybe there's some sort of like a line on the map where if you bring the ball back past it, you know, like if you jump out of the map, it'll give you a few seconds to get back in the playable area or you die. Maybe something like that. If you bring the ball back behind a certain point, it like automatically resets after a few seconds. That might be an interesting solution, to be honest. I don't think it should like kill you or something, because we did see past weekend in Dallas, there are some situationals where you pick up the ball, but your whole team dies. So what can you do? You can't drop it. So the only option is to run back to spawn. It's the only, what are you meant to do? Run out there and die? So, you know, often you'll find that they park the bus, not necessarily intentionally, but they just end up in a position where parking the bus is kind of forced. But you could argue in that scenario that, okay, the ball should automatically reset. So maybe there's some sort of like 22-yard line or something where a reset beyond that point occurs. That was one of Shotzzy's ideas. One of the other ideas to stop park the bus was to change the spawns so that if you are parking the bus, you don't just spawn all on the boy in the back that's holding the ball. You instead spawn, kind of like capture the flag. You might spawn out at one of the points, and you've got to make the decision, do I wrap back and help my boy, or do I overextend and try and play for the reset? That's maybe a couple of options that the developers could consider, but we'll see if that really goes anywhere. Now, speaking of Ranked, it's officially here. ReeaL was the first player to get to the top 250 of the pros, and of course have his name and everything appear as it usually does. You'll see Eric Boom on there as well, Beans, among other players. Havoc was here at the time, a little bit further down than he was later in the evening. Of course, Beans no longer on Cloud9, so he no longer gets the pro player badge. I think there was also some notes. Often you'll find that pro players, at least one or two, don't get fully reflected here. So you'll find a couple of pros will get to the top 250 and they won't have this like badge display. I think that is true for Purge. Lawrence Messon says number 12 Purge here, but I don't know if it was coming up for him. So some people were speculating, does that mean he's no longer on Boston, right? But Lawrence Messon does put him here. So yeah, not so sure about that. It does seem that Boston could stick together. They definitely contemplated a change or two with Cammy and Purge, but the question would be, is there a viable option to replace them with? Is it a good idea? How much money would they have to pay to do it? And all these other factors. So maybe they will stick it out for now, but time will tell over the coming days, because it seems that Cloud9 are holding a few things up because they can't form a damn roster right now. We'll discuss that more in a second. But yeah, Havoc was top in the numbers at least here. We've got Ghosty, ReeaL, Abe, among various other pros that made it to the top 250 without too much difficulty. Of course, there was a lot of comedy clips coming out, certainly from Formal's stream. He played Nasty, Beans and Purge together, lost to them in Ranked, and he wasn't very happy about it. But lots going on. There was also this clip, actually. I've just got to share this little highlight. This is a Tatch in the window getting absolutely world-starred by Beans. This is how it looks from the other perspective. You know, Beans, such a quality sniper and a great player at times. It's kind of been unfortunate to see what's come of him over the last couple of seasons, broken by Mercules or whatever you want to say. But of course, speaking of Cloud9, they've still got to form a roster, and, well, Benjay might have turned them down. It's a bit unclear what they're going to do, because Spart genuinely, I think, is better off staying on the bush than he is joining Cloud9, to be honest. And which other players will they get? Of course, there were various they were targeting. Who's going to say yes? I don't know. Of course, they could get a couple of players on loan, which might make more sense for those players, because then they could still be getting paid a decent salary by the org they actually play for and just get loaned out to Cloud9. That's a possibility. There's also been a lot of talk, understandably, about OpTic's, because OpTic's, a stallion, of course, as Zuma's going to suggest here in a second. And look, he had a good run in the bracket, but also both of the Stallions teams, they bombed out very early on. Yeah, his numbers were good, but as Craze says, no hate to OpTic's, but he had a 1.19 against Peel, Phantoms, Proda and Bic, two of them never played on LAN, and he had a 1 flat against Huntsman in a series they lost. His PR is insane if he's going to get this spot. Now, look, would he be getting an offer if players that Cloud9 actually wanted were going to take the poverty salary? Maybe not. Are they just keeping on going down the list? But it does look like OpTic's is getting the nod here. Again, there's always a debate on this about, oh, does this guy deserve it? Has he been around long enough? Has he done enough to deserve the offer and all of this? But as Nadeshot says, look, it's about taking some level of risk. The guy was quality in Fortnite. He's been in the mixing COD for a little bit. And as a result, people are like, okay, this guy could have something. Same goes for Renegade. They have a ceiling that hasn't been defined yet. Let's use Lqgend as an example. Thrown onto a terrible team, and he was terrible. So, you know, yeah, maybe, but also maybe not. So I can see it from both sides, really. Benjay says this whole narrative about someone like OpTic's getting insane PR and skipping the line is absurd. Your problem isn't with creators, but with GMs and players in the league. You don't want to call those guys out, and Zinni says it's like when we picked up Capsule on Boston. Bunch of players were crying on the timeline. Then when they saw him play a match, they were like, okay, this guy's actually pretty good. So yes, we'll see. It's all situational, says Zinni. And Azuma says, look, the guy's a stallion, so of course he's going to get signed at some point. But let's talk about the Kenny drama, because Scrap and Neum were playing some ranked as of last night. Kenny, as of recording this, still hasn't made a comment. Obviously, he made this comment back in February 2025, and the reason I brought this up again, of course, was because at the time he was on OpTic, having a difficult time. He then went on to join Minnesota Rocker shortly after that. Then he was on Thieves. Still got LA Thieves in his name, actually, but as it stands, there's no tweet discussing what his future plans may or may not be. But Scrap was talking about, we saw a clip yesterday where he said that so much respect for Kenny, one of the best teammates he's ever had, it didn't work out. Now, he goes on to say two very interesting things. The first interesting thing is that they didn't make the call, as in the players didn't make the call, apparently. He says that he thought they were actually going to stick together, or at least that was a likely possibility. Then he gets a call to tell him that no, they're making a move. So, okay, how do we think about this? Because typically in competitive COD history, the players call the shots. And when they made the changes going into this season, the initial feeling was they were going to stick it out. Then that story changed. Was that a management decision? Was that a player decision? It's difficult to imagine the players don't have some say, right? Like when you've got Scrap and HyDra on the team, and aBeZy as well, but like Scrap and HyDra have been the duo for the last couple of years. It's difficult to imagine that the organization just says, all right, lads, like, we're doing this. I don't care what you say, right? Like, there's probably an element, surely, of like, okay, this is what we're looking to do. Presumably, it's like, you know, can you just give a sign off? Like, are you down for this to a certain extent? And look, we saw it with OpTic last year when they were struggling. Shotzzy wasn't particularly keen to make the final change, Skies for Mercules, because it's like, damn, we're going to do another change. It's going to potentially break the chemistry or something yet again. And sometimes you need the ownership, as it was obviously Hex, but also Zinni, who was very much pushing for Mercules to get signed. Sometimes you need them to just say, all right, like this is how it's going to be, and you're going to make the move. And in this case, as I said, for some time, the Thieves are always going to do this. They were always going to do this because they'd paid money to Huntsman to get the option to sign Neum. Neum fried in challenges, and Kenny got fried on the Saturday. So it's like there was no way they weren't going to execute this option. So presumably, and like, as much as Scrap and HyDra and aBeZy might have had some say in it, I mean, they were all there at that LA Thieves party on Sunday night. Kenny was there as well, obviously. So it didn't seem totally clear. Like, if Kenny knew that he was dropped, I'm not saying that he wouldn't have turned up to the party, but like, he was there. So I don't know if the decision was necessarily made at that point by the players. Maybe Scrap and HyDra expected it. Maybe Scrap and HyDra thought that it was probably coming anyway. Of course, aBeZy's also in the this discussion, but like Scrap and HyDra have been the Thieves for the last couple of years. So he says that he didn't really have anything to do with the dropping. It was the team themselves that made the call, but he's, you know, willing to accept it and moving forward. But of course, the other probably more controversial part of this is he's trying to diagnose, given that what he says about Kenny, great teammate, and most of Kenny's series that he played this year for Thieves were good. It's just 1 in every 3 was terrible, and like that can't happen. So why is that the case, right? Is Kenny not got it anymore? Because I mean, he played OpTic, he was absolutely fine, had a 1.3. So it's like, you know, what's that about, right? How do you put the 2 and 2 together? Scrap seems to think it's certainly more mental, more psychological for Kenny than it is anything else, which I understand, but also where does that stem from, right? He thinks it stems from when he was on OpTic and he was struggling and the team weren't there to help him.
I'm never going to say anything about Ken. The whole time that Ken was with us, he was a good teammate. He made everything that we want him to change, you know? He changed for the better for our team, and that's all we could really ask for. So I'll never shit on Ken because I understood like how good he is as a player and how good he was for, you know, probably almost a decade. So we just really couldn't get anything going. And I think, I'm gonna be honest, as the players, like I didn't think we were really expecting to change. I talked again about this, like we were not expecting to change. I got a call and that was it. But here's what it is. We got that boy Jay now. We gotta turn around. We gotta turn around the year. Bad first major, but if it's any major to have a bad major, I would say it's probably this one. So why Neum? Well, I think the reason why Neum is because, well, one, we need an AR player. And I think personally for us, we thought that he was probably going to be our best fit. I think that maybe he, you know, he is kind of like a flex, I would say, but kind of like a slower flex. Like kind of like a, and actually low-key plays like Merc. Like he's like a slow flex. And I think that's low-key someone that's going to benefit our team. And yeah, man, I'm excited. That's really the only thing I'm going to say on Ken. Because I fuck with Ken heavy. Ken knows this. And it just sucks. It didn't work out. Why do you think Ken gets so much hate? Well, respectfully, to everyone that was involved, like last year, I think the whole OpTic team literally like checked him out to the max. If I'm gonna be honest, he played super shit, and it was just a check out every single day to go in. And I don't think anyone helped him. You know, I just didn't think towards the end, like after the end of the year, they were really a team anymore. And I guess they should have changed. I mean, in hindsight, they should have changed, but. I mean, bro, I don't think anyone helped anyone on that team try to get better or try to... I think everyone was just checked down, just ready to change in general. And obviously, it's OpTic, so Ken's going to get a lot of fucking hate for that. And that's just the reality of it. But the reason I personally think Ken played so bad in BO6 was just his, like the team. Honestly. Like, I will never put that 1 year on Ken alone. Because no one was helping anyone.
Definitely one of the explanations of all time here from Scrap. Also, it did seem like OpTic were trying to help him to a large part, right? I don't know exactly what Scrap knows on that situation, but also the logic, if you take it to its conclusion, it's like, well, did Thieves try and help him now, right? Like, I mean, surely if you're roasted OpTic for not helping him in a difficult period, then Thieves have also just dropped him on his neck, right? So it's like, it kind of can't go both ways, really. And also the situation where Kenny goes on that horrible run of form, they go 0-18, and yeah, his confidence is obviously shot during that period. But look, to some degree, what are OpTic meant to do as well? Like, if Kenny's getting farmed, and it's difficult, like Scrap wasn't in the OpTic camp. He doesn't know what they did, how they tried to help, and all these other things, right? And if Kenny's getting slammed, then like it's not necessarily on the team to resolve that. And also it's a long time ago now, right? Like for a player of Kenny's caliber and what he's achieved, you can't just turn around and say that, oh, it's OpTic's fault, because like he's even been on a team since then. This was that horrible run when he was on OpTic, the 0-18 run during that qualifier stint. And then it got a little bit better, then it stayed bad, of course, then they got rid of him. And then he goes on to Rocker, right? That's what happened. So he then joins Minnesota Rocker. And did they get any better than they were with X? Not really. But it's, you know, he had quite the long stint on Rocker at the end of last season, played the World Cup. Obviously, they had a bit of a shambles there. Then he starts out this season on Thieves. There were some wins, but there were certainly some losses as well. So, look, Kenny's played quite a lot over the last couple of years. I think it's difficult to just go back to the OpTic stint and say that's what... I mean, look, that was not the final nail exactly, but that was another example of Kenny having a very challenging season. We've seen that before, and usually he will bounce back. This time that's not happened. But, you know, eventually that probably wasn't going to happen, right? So, anyway, Scrap gives a few thoughts. Intrigued to your thoughts as ever on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.